truth is not what you think it is. Reality? Just another perspective in the chaos of human perception. But what if everything you believed, about justice, morality, even knowledge, was nothing more than a well-argued illusion? And if there's no absolute truth, who really holds the power? Today we dive into the minds of the Sophists, the ancient rule-breakers who dared to say, truth is whatever you can convince people it is. Imagine a world where winning an argument matters more than being right. Welcome to 5th century BCE Greece, where the Sophists rolled into town like philosophical rock stars, minus the guitars, but with an equally disruptive attitude. These traveling teachers didn't waste time on existential musings about the meaning of life. They were too busy making sure their students could argue their way out of anything. In a society where public speaking was the ultimate superpower, learning to debate effectively meant power, influence, and possibly avoiding a death sentence if you ever found yourself in court, which in Athens happened a lot. Unlike Socrates and his squad, who were obsessed with discovering some ultimate cosmic truth, the Sophists had a much simpler view. Truth? That's just a matter of perspective. Enter Protagoras, the man who basically invented the phrase, "you do you." His claim that man is the measure of all things wasn't just deep, it was dangerous. If truth is based on personal perspective, then who decides what's right and wrong? The gods? The government? Some old guy in a toga yelling in the marketplace? Protagoras' relativism threw everything into question, making him a legend to some and a menace to others. The idea that there was no universal truth shook the foundations of Greek philosophy, because if every individual sees the world differently, then morality, justice, and even reality itself become flexible concepts. What's right for one person might be wrong for another. And who's to say which one is actually correct? This wasn't just an intellectual puzzle. It was an existential crisis waiting to happen. But if you thought he was radical, meet Gorgias, the ancient Greek equivalent of that one friend who takes philosophical debates way too far. Gorgias argued that nothing really exists, and even if it did, we couldn't understand it, and even if we couldn't communicate it properly. Basically, he made the entire concept of truth implode on itself, then walked away like a rhetorical arsonist. His work on non-being was like a philosophical horror movie. First, he erased reality, then he erased knowledge, and finally, he made sure no one could even talk about it. Now, was he serious, or was he just flexing his intellectual muscles? Hard to say. But either way, he proved that language itself could be manipulated to the point where nothing meant anything anymore. Naturally, this didn't sit well with philosophers like Socrates and Plato, who saw the Sophists as glorified snake oil salesmen, more interested in winning arguments than seeking wisdom. Socrates, though sometimes mistaken for a sophist because of his relentless questioning, believed in absolute moral truths and thought rhetoric should serve the pursuit of real knowledge, not just persuasion. But Plato? Oh, Plato hated the Sophists. He painted them as master manipulators, using fancy words to twist reality and corrupt justice. In the Republic, he warned that these guys could convince a jury that a guilty man was innocent just by playing verbal gymnastics. To him, they weren't philosophers. They were con artists with a good vocabulary. Aristotle, always the middle ground guy, had a slightly more balanced take. In Rhetoric, he admitted that persuasive speech was powerful, but insisted it should be used for truth, not against it. He distinguished between genuine argumentation, based on logic, ethics, and evidence, and sophistry, which was basically just winning for the sake of winning. Unlike the Sophists, who saw rhetoric as an end in itself, Aristotle believed it should be a tool for uncovering reality, not distorting it. But regardless of what he or Plato thought, one thing was clear. The Sophists had already left their mark on intellectual history. Their ideas weren't just a passing trend, they shaped Roman rhetoric, influencing legal and political thought in ways that would last for centuries. Figures like Cicero and Quintilian studied and refined their techniques, applying them in courtroom battles and political speeches. The Sophists had unlocked something crucial. Persuasion, when wielded correctly, was just as powerful as truth itself. And in a world where influence mattered more than ideals, that made them invaluable. Whether in the Senate, in legal disputes, or even in everyday conversations, the ability to shape perception was everything. And that's why their legacy still matters today. The idea that truth is shaped by cultural and personal perspectives hasn't gone away, it's only gotten more complicated. From postmodern philosophy to political spin, from legal arguments to media narratives, we're still wrestling with the same questions the Sophists asked 2,500 years ago. Is truth absolute, or is it just a social construct? Is justice based on universal principles, or does it change depending on who's in power? In an era of misinformation, bias, and competing realities, their core debate, whether truth is discovered or created, feels more relevant than ever. So, were the Sophists intellectual heroes challenging the status quo, or just really good at talking their way into power? Love them or hate them, they forced ancient thinkers to refine their arguments, rethink their assumptions, and grapple with the slipperiness of truth. Whether you see them as corrupters of wisdom or pioneers of intellectual freedom, one thing's for sure: they shaped the way we think about knowledge, morality, and persuasion even today. I'll leave you to discuss in the comments. You can support us by subscribing if you haven't already. Take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and I'll catch you soon in another video.